The Prime Minister is fighting until the very last minute over his flagship Rwanda Bill, which is back in the Commons in just a couple of hours' time for the third and final hurdle. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer came head-to-head at Prime Minister's questions earlier today, where the controversial plan to ship asylum seekers to the African nation came once again into the spotlight. The Labour leader branded it a complete waste of time and said yesterday's Tory rebellion left the Prime Minister brutally exposed yet again.
We have worked through a record number of cases and returned a record number of people back to where they've come. All of that is a plan that is working, and we can see that it's working because the numbers of people coming to this country are down by over a third, Mr. Speaker. But again, it is a bit rich to hear him in here pretending that he cares about how we actually stop the boats when he's been crystal clear. He's been crystal clear and said that even if the plan is working to reduce the numbers, he would still scrap it, Mr. Speaker. It's because he has no values, no conviction and no plan, and is back to square one.
But Rishi Sunak batted off any criticism and accused Starmer of siding with lefty lawyers.
I have absolute conviction that the plan we've put in place will work. Absolute conviction, because I believe it's important that we grip this problem. 4 eminent cases said this is undoubtedly the most robust legislation passed, and a former Supreme Court justice has been clear that the bill would work. But I know, Mr. Speaker, he's always been more interested in what lefty lawyers have to say, Mr. Speaker. I've even got here the textbook that he authored for them. And it's called, and I quote, European Human Rights Law by Keir Starmer.
God, a lot of hilarity and uproar and hubbub going on there. Joining me in the studio now, I don't know if we'll recreate that atmosphere here, probably not. Political journalist and Times Radio presenter Adam Boulton, good to see you. And former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, good to have you both here. For goodness sake, this has gone on and on and on and on. There's going to be some kind of denouement tonight, but how much tension is there? How likely is it, Adam, that Rishi Sunak will be hoist on his own petard with this one?
Well, I have to say, if you listen into the debate going on now, the House of Commons is nearly empty. There isn't exactly much tension. Everyone's working towards this evening when there will be a series of votes. This present session could go on as late as 6:45. Then there would be votes on amendments, and then there has to be an hour-long debate before we get to the third reading, which is where it's in principle. But the SNP is saying that they could use a procedural measure to delay that, maybe as late as 11 o'clock tonight. So, you know, if you're tense about what's going to happen in this vote, you may have to wait a while longer. It also appears from declared intentions to vote against this bill on the Conservative side that it's going to pass, that simply we've heard about half a dozen names, much smaller than the 60 or so who rebelled on amendments yesterday. So it looks as if that rebellion would not be enough to defeat the government in any way.
And Charlie, I mean, I wonder what you think about public appetite for further debate, discussion, yet another vote. You know, whether the public, has its breath bated, just aching to know what the outcome of tonight's vote, whether it's 11 or 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it is, what the outcome will be, or if nobody really cares much about this at all, apart from other MPs and those people who have to report, unfortunately, on these matters like us.
Well, the only person that I think would want this bill done and dusted in super quick time, apart from the Prime Minister, is the public. You know, they do want to see this, I think, off the front pages. They don't want to hear about any more internal Conservative Party warfare. They just want the government to do what it says it's going to do, to get on with it, and then it can move on to things like the economy. We saw inflation slightly up, which was announced today. That has to come down even more, and the Chancellor will probably set out a few policies in the March budget, and the government just needs to get on with other things that it's going to do to win back support of the public. But it's only by demonstrating that it can do the things that it's going to say that it'll then win the support of the public and have a chance of winning the next general election.
Well, Adam, it did look as if Rishi Sunak might crash and burn on this issue yesterday. And when you were watching and observing in your normal sagacious manner, and you've been doing this for a long, long time, did you think, good God, why has he chosen this particular matter to hang his coat on, because frankly, it's been doomed in so many different ways: impractical, incredibly expensive, defeated by our own courts for all different reasons. We know that 6 Rwandan asylum seekers were welcomed here in this country because they were fleeing Rwanda, and that was last year. I mean, there's so many problems and issues with this one, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I did wonder whether on November the 15th last year, when the ruling came out in the British courts against this measure, whether that wasn't the moment to walk away from this. And as you say, even if the government wins tonight, as we expect, the chances of people getting on a plane this side of the general election to be sent to Rwanda are very remote, because there are a lot of legal stages. It's got to get through the Lords and all the rest of it. And the bill is mounting. Indeed, Paul Kagame, the leader of Rwanda today, said, well, he's not bothered either way. He's quite happy to give the money back. And it's a matter for the British. And he's the only winner so far.
Oh, my God, why doesn't Rishi Sunak just take the money and move on to something else?
This is where we get onto it. Why is he doing this? This is performative. This is not dealing with the fact that we've got record levels overall of immigration into this country. This is singling out something and saying, I'm going to act tough, be nasty to these people crossing the channel, hopefully deter them. And that will be enough to say to the British public, I'm coping with the wider issue of immigration, and mixed in with the attacks on Keir Starmer for being a lefty lawyer, which we're going to get very used to as the election approaches. I mean, incidentally, that brandishing of the report that Keir Starmer had once written on human rights, he was told off by the Speaker for doing that, because you're not allowed to have props in the House of Commons. So, there's an awful lot of electioneering, and one does have to say this is going to cost an awful lot. Is it really going to address the bigger issue of immigration, about which people have many concerns? Probably not. But if passions are sufficiently raised, they may think it was.
And haven't we already had enough of that back to square one catchphrase? I've really had it with that one already, and it's only been going a few weeks. Well, boring. Let us find out what Suella Braverman's been saying.
And the British people are fed up. They have run out of patience. They have run out of time. And this is our last chance to get it right. The foreign court overrode English judges, overrode the will of the government, overrode the will of the British people to control our borders and stop the boats. That's a problem with the foreign court.
Well, it wasn't foreign court, of course, if you want to call it a foreign court, because it was done in the British courts that they upheld the rule. Also, this phrase foreign court is another way of trying to heat up the argument.
Yeah, trying to us and them, trying to say that's them and we are us.
Is an international court in which we participate.
Of course it is.
We have British judges.
But all of these things are rather clunking, Charlie. I mean, Adam, picks them apart. People can see him deconstructing it, focusing on a tiny element of a huge immigration and migration problem. We know that the punchline of this whole thing is if they actually do fly anyone to Rwanda at all, there's a maximum number of, I don't know whether it's 700, 900, call it 9,000 people. Even if it's that, it's a pathetic drop in the ocean when it comes to the size of this considerable problem/issue. So the whole thing is about, smoke, mirrors, deflecting, diverting, putting attention on something that doesn't really merit it. Lots of people getting very cross about it. Meanwhile, time is ebbing away, isn't it? And very probably ebbing away for the Tories.
It is, and that's why I think this is such a mountain that Rishi Sunak is prepared to climb all the way to the top, because it's not in the middle of an electoral cycle. It's not at the beginning of one where you've got an 80-seat majority, where if things do become too difficult, you can make a bit of a U-turn, and you've still got time to offer goodies in the run-up to a general election. Your time is running out. And this is something that the government said it's going to do, so it has to continue down this path. And, Suella is in a bit of a sticky situation, because she'll be going through the lobbies tonight, presumably. She's already said she's going to vote against it, so she'll be in the same lobbies as Sir Keir Starmer that is voting against this legislation.
That's what's absolutely extraordinary
yes,
about this.
Yes,
here we have
highlight
the Tory.
this, because this is a really big deal.
Yeah.
So Charlie said that brilliantly well. The vista, the vision of Keir Starmer and Suella Braverman marching arm in arm to vote against. I mean, how on earth has it ended up at this? And this is a big deal, isn't it?
Well, it's completely mad. But, here we had the campaign chief, Isaac Levido, on Monday telling Tory MPs the only way in which we can win the election is be united. We've got a policy which is designed to appeal to the right. And what have we got? The right saying it's not good enough for us and we're going to embarrass it. So, one does begin to think that the Conservative Party has a death wish at this point,
Charlie?
and that they just want to get it over with, lose the election, and then fight amongst themselves over who's going to lead the party.
Yes, and very briefly, it reminds me of those Brexit days where there was the argument, you know, no deal is better than a bad deal. Well, it seems to some people that no bill is better than a bad bill if you're on the far right of the Conservative Party, because you want to see this as tough a set of measures as possible. But the reality is, you know, we just don't know. You know, Rishi Sunak's plan, unamended, could go through and it could work. You know, lawyers have suggested that it will. It might not. But until you get a bill on the statute, until you actually see it in practice, you will never actually know. So I think it would be well, you know, it would do Tory party MPs well to just support the Prime Minister, to stop the divisions in open warfare, to get behind him, hope that it works. I'm sure that it will, if the lawyers have said that it will. And you can start to see flights take off the ground, and you can then start to show to the public you're doing what you said you're going to do, and don't wreck that. Don't vote for reform, because that will let Labour in through the back door. They've voted against every kind of set of tough immigration measure possible. Stick with the Tories. We're turning the economy around. They'll come up with all other good things that they can do, and they will hope that that is the way in which they could secure that fifth historic term in office.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that the other wing of the party, the One Nation wing of the party, who have said from the beginning that they don't really like the idea of the Rwanda scheme at all, they have made it pretty clear that they're not going to fight this, that they are going to support the government if that's what the government wants to do. So you've only got the right, the Lee Andersons, the Suella Bravermans and that, continuing to fight. And as you say, it's exactly like what we saw in Brexit.
Compromise is not a dirty word, as
God,
Theresa
whoever
once
wanted to go
Brexit.
back to that again? My goodness. Thank you very much indeed, Charlie.